All right, so they land on Mars anyways, and they refuel, and they get to Earth, and they're landing, and they land more in the water, I guess, and they kind of pinpoint where this Olalu's at, and he embraces Anki when he sees him, and they were talking about fish suits. Now, there was an eagle helmet, and then there was the fish suits this time, and I thought it was kind of weird. I was like, okay, so yeah, I do remember seeing pictures of carvings and art from the Sumerian areas, Sumeria basically, and they showed them sometimes in these fish suits, and they look like fish with humans, like a mermaid. Um, Maybe that's where that story for the mermaids comes from. I don't know. Did they really look like fish suits, or was it just symbolic? Same thing with the eagle's helmet. You know, they depict them with these eagle helmets on too, and these bird helmets, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? They're not really humans with bird heads or lion heads or dog heads or anything. Those are masks, and they're symbolic. They're not saying that these were people with these animal heads. So they get there. Alalu embraces Enki because he's his son-in-law, and they have a relationship. He likes Enki, and they get there, and they're like looking around trying to figure out if there is some gold, and of course there is. It's not the perfect situation that they would want, but so he tells them, yeah, it's Alalu's here, and there's stuff, and they're trying to like set up camp, and they start building camp and starting to get ready to. So they build this camp, and here's another parallel with the biblical Genesis. They start building their home camp, and I think it's Eridu that they did this. Anyway, southern Iraq, down there close to the delta where Eden was. I think they called it Eden, but Eden. They had a funny language where everything was syllables. So like you'd have ed to make ed, and then you have an en to make n. So they pronounced it that way too, ed n. Some syllabally stuff like you'd have a verb, you'd have a vowel and a consonant together to make a certain sound, and then you'd add them together to make a word. Just thought you might want to know that. They start building this place, and they get, they're everybody's got their job to do. Certain ones were going around, and they were like taking inventory of all the animals that they could see, all the birds, all the oceanic life, and the land animals, and they were taking inventory of all this stuff. So I'm guessing they did this worldwide. I don't know. But I don't know how they could do it in 6 days. Anyways, everybody had their jobs to do, and there was people who were building like a wall, and then they were building their huts inside the wall, and to keep them safe from whatever scary things out there might be. I don't know how they could be scared of anything. They were like the biggest things on the planet. I think, according to what they say their size was, they could probably, a couple of them could probably wrestle an elephant down. Um, so they get this place built, and then on the sixth, they're like finish up on the 6th day, and the 7th day they declared that this is going to be like their day off, their day of rest, where they can like take it all in. Another funny thing was they were fascinated by the moon, but they hated the Earth days because they were so short, and they talked about this. Um, So they get to work and they're like trying to find this gold, and they work for 6 days trying to get this gold out of the ground, and they're looking for it certain places. Sorry, I don't know. I shouldn't be yawning. I mean, I'm kind of tired, but not. So they do this for 6 days, and then they take inventory. The problem is they're getting more iron and copper and other things out of the earth than they are gold, and they're after the gold. They're not after everything else. So this is evidence that apparently they did mine copper and iron. So it's very plausible that they could have made iron tools to, mine the gold. But I don't know, it almost sounds like they were just digging up dirt and sand and um, processing it. And I imagine they were smelting it or something. There's some way. I know gold people who are like gold people. They know all the ins and outs of it. It'd be interesting to talk to them. And not working out. And so they're freaking out on the home planet again. And eventually they decide that they're going to send Enlil down there. Enlil's the half brother of Enki and the rightful heir of the throne on Nibiru. Anu is their father, and they also have a half sister, Nenema, I think is her name. Anyways, and then some of these, have kids, some of them don't. So he comes down, he's put in charge, and I think they were kind of arguing about who's doing what. And then eventually Anu comes down too, and they have a powwow, and they decide they come up with a plan, and they decide who's going to do what, where, and how. And they said they drew lots, but I think it's weird how it just ended up the right way. Like Anu went back and he sat on the throne, and Enlil was in charge. He was the commander in chief of all the operations on Earth, and Enki was like the scientist guy. He was supposed to go and find the gold somewhere else, and make things happen basically. So they found gold down in some people call it East Africa. Some people pinpoint it to Southeast Africa. I was like, well, maybe it's just South Africa. Maybe it's just the southern part of Africa. And they talked about the lands that was shaped like a heart. I guess that's Africa. And of course, they knew what each continent looked like and all that, the water, all that. They spoke of the planet being like 1/3 in ice caps, top and bottom, and then the middle of the earth was like water and land. So they're working and they're getting gold, and everything's starting to go better, but they have this other group of guys that's called the Ijiji. The Ijiji was a workforce, and they were actually another. They were not the same as the Anunnaki. They were a different race, apparently, a different type of being, and they were big, but they didn't have the, what would you say? They were beneath the Anunnaki. Let's put it that way. So they were the workforce, and they're doing all this, and then one day they just decide they don't want to do it anymore because it's backbreaking work. They're trying to get this gold out of every ounce of rock, and they're digging the tunnels and breaking the rocks and making it happen. So they rebel and they go after Enlil, and Enlil wanted to make an example out of one of them, and Anu's like, well, let's not do that. Basically, he wanted to unalive one. And there's another story that's way more. I mean, a lot of these stories I'm shortening up, and I'm kind of like just making them as quick as I can. I don't know if the details are super important, but they're certainly interesting if you read all of them in detail. So Anu says, let's not do that. And then Enki's like, well, I'll try to figure something out. So Enki and his half-sister, who is kind of like a medical officer. Enki was like a scientist, and he was really smart, and he could like solve problems. And then there was, I think it's Ningashita. I might be getting it wrong. There was another one. He was kind of like a master engineer. So all of these three were like come up with this idea, and Enki was like, there's these hominids down south in the Abzu, South Africa, and they're very hairy, and they kind of are similar. They can walk upright, and but they're just very hairy, and they're very aggressive, and they can't speak. And they just grunt and growl and make noise. So they come up with the idea where they're gonna use these hominids, and they're gonna like put some of their essence into them, basically saying, kind of like the Bible, let's make them in our likeness. And so they started experimenting and trying to make this new being that could be a good worker. So they did a lot of experiments, and after a lot of failures, they kind of figured it out. And those are some really interesting stories too. You guys, if you ever get a chance, you got to read some of these stories, or even listen to them on the Boaz Mysteries, where they kind of AI narrate the books. So where was it? Yeah, they're trying to make these beings, and then they failed, and they finally got one. And I forget if they were like impregnating these hominids, and nothing was working out. Well, make a long story short, they finally got an idea where they were gonna impregnate one of the Annunaki women, and she was going to incubate the embryos. And they got what they wanted. They finally got the perfect human, and they went and showcased him in what would be the Garden of Eden in the Bible, which was just really Eden, where these guys had all their basically they brought stuff from their home planet, and they planted it, and they were like growing this stuff, these trees and plants and all this other stuff, and they brought animals with them too. So yeah, that's another cool story. So in the Bible, they talked about the serpent. Well, apparently Enki was the symbol for the serpent, and there's more to that later too. But they were like, Enlil didn't like the idea of him being there, and he couldn't. He was like, no, we're not gonna let him eat from the tree of life or the tree of knowledge. Basically, the tree of knowledge was, enlightenment, and crap. I will continue this on the next video.